the month, which in this case is Matthew 5:4. And let's go ahead and recite that together. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Today we're going to discuss the sin of immodesty, as we are looking at things of the world and how the world promotes or encourages certain sins, and certainly a number of the things that we've been talking about this quarter. Immodesty is something that we all have to deal with. Modest apparel is an issue that has confronted Christians every day. Should a Christian woman wear shorts or pants or miniskirts or low-cut blouses? Should Christian men be covered? Should they wear shirts when they're out working out? What kinds of shirts? What do people wear when they go swimming? Or should people not go swimming at all? These are things that Christians have to grapple with and come to an answer. And then, of course, what effect might this have on certain activities? Like I said, can Christians go swimming in groups? Should they participate in certain activities or athletic events? Or can they even go to those sorts of games? There's no simple answer or straight yes or no. Christian garments should be X number of inches long. They should reach to this point on the body. There's no clear-cut answer given in the Bible, but there are a number of principles and guidelines that we're going to look at today that help us actually discern good and evil, what is considered to be modest and immodest. So let's start, as we do, by kind of looking about what's common. What do we see around us? How does the world view immodesty?
Question goes to whether they do or not.
Yes. There are a lot of times where we look at something and be like, wow, it's a little bit too far, whereas the world doesn't view it as anything out of the ordinary. Anybody else? So people a lot of times think that they should be able to wear whatever it is that they want to wear. If someone's uncomfortable because someone else is wearing something revealing, the problem isn't with what they're actually wearing, it's with the person who's viewing it and has a problem with it, because you're judging them as having something wrong, and it shows a judgmental heart, as opposed to the verse. If someone has an issue wearing that garment, whatever it is, that shows that they have an issue with self-esteem or self-worth. Our culture and economy is pushing immodesty. It's how a lot of businesses make money, right? Ads, billboards, commercials. We drive down the street and we see people wearing all kinds of things or lack thereof, and it's done that way to get your attention. Fashion pushes clothing that's short, tight, or low to one degree or another for both men and women, boys and girls. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are, as long as you feel good about yourself when you're wearing that thing. You may go to the beach and you may see toddler girls running around in bikinis, and the world would describe that as cute. Active wear clothing is extremely popular now, and you see women going out in yoga-style tight pants and short tops, and men going out in short or tight shorts and tank tops that have sleeves so large you can see everything underneath when they're walking by or they put their arms up. Some professions actually expect people to dress immodestly, and if you don't, then you can't participate or work within that profession. Restaurants such as Hooters or those types of restaurants require women to dress in that way. Cheerleaders and dancers have to dress in an immodest or provocative way. Competitive swimmers and gymnasts have to dress in that way. And dressing outside of the norm, like I said, is criticized or not allowed. If you remember to the Olympics that occurred last summer, the last Summer Olympics, there was a women's beach volleyball team, and I don't remember off the top of my head what country this was from, but they were fined because they chose to wear shorts instead of the bikini bottoms that is required when you're participating in beach volleyball as a competitive sport. And it ensued a lot of discussion about what is allowed or not allowed, or revealing or not revealing. And maybe at some point that may be not as big of an issue. And it doesn't just extend to in-person immodesty, right? We live in an age where people take pictures of their immodesty and they post it all over the internet for people to see. And you see the comments and the likes and the posts praising that person as being brave for wearing or posting and feeling comfortable wearing whatever that garment might be. The world, as Hugh said, doesn't see immodesty as immodest. They just see it as clothing that people are wearing. But we know that the Bible has a lot to say about how a Christian should appear and dress and what our appeal should be to the world when we're presenting ourselves. So let's go back to the beginning as we have for the past several weeks. Let's go ahead and read Genesis. We're actually going to start in chapter 2. We've read these passages for a number of times over the last few weeks. And we're going to start actually in chapter 2 in verse 25. This is, of course, right after God created Adam, and Adam had no helper that was comparable to him. This was still on day 6. And so God fashioned Eve from Adam's rib. And in verse 25, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. And of course, in chapter 3, Eve is tempted, and we go to verse 6 of chapter 3. So the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and then they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, "Where are you?" So he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." Skipping down to verse 21. Also for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. So from this set of passages and these circumstances, what can we see about nakedness as God views it and has given us in these passages?
You can be covered and still be naked.
Yeah.
And still be naked.
Yes. Man's standards of clothing are not always God's standards, and you can absolutely be clothed and still be considered naked. We see here in verse 7 that they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And there's word coverings here is the Hebrew word here that's put up on the board, and that is a garment that mainly covers the midsection, like an apron or a loincloth along those lines. What he makes in verse 21 is this word that's used here, and that is typically a long shirt-like garment typically worn under robes or other clothing that reaches down typically to the mid-thigh to knee. Okay, so what God makes here for them is something that substantially covers them more than what they made for themselves. Man's standards are not always God's standards. And the way I read into this, in verse 10, Adam and Eve knew what they made was not enough. What did he say when he was hiding? He said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." To me here, Adam is saying, I'm still not properly clothed. We made ourselves garments, but it's not really enough. I'm hiding because I'm naked. And so God corrects the issue. We also see that nakedness in the wrong context is shameful, whereas prior to that, prior to eating the fruit, it wasn't. Okay, and so there's a change here, and they find shame in this. And they sought, because of their disobedience and their nakedness, to conceal it from God's eyes. It's shameful to expose body parts that should be private or should be covered. We see throughout Isaiah and even into Revelation chapter 3 that a lot of times God uses the shame of nakedness as a reference for the shame of sin. And he corrects these nations or these people in these passages and tells them that if they don't correct their lives. He's going to expose their nakedness for all to see. There's a shame that should inherently be associated with being uncovered, and that the world should feel that way. And in the 1 Corinthians 12, the middle of that chapter, Paul uses the different members of the body of Christ as a way of saying that everybody has a different role. And some are more presentable and more public, and some should be less presentable in terms of clothing. And so, of course, there are parts that inherently we understand and should understand at least that they should be covered, because within the wrong context, that nakedness is shameful. Okay. Does anybody see anything else in this passage?
Well, you could say that, the act of covering again in Genesis chapter 3 was, it certainly was a reminder of sin, and also, an act of grace, where God is providing something, obviously, that they needed as well. And so I think that's an interesting thought, too.
Mm-hmm. God has provided us with what we need. This is what I understand that you're referencing. Correct me if this is wrong, but referencing the animal skins covering up the shame of the sin, but also providing some guidelines to them on, hey, you've done these incorrect things. Let's give some direction and guidance on how to correct our lives. Good. Anything else? Is immodesty an issue that is only for women? No, it's not. A lot of times we address it from that standpoint, right? And some of the passages we're going to look at later point to women and their apparel and how godly Christian women should dress. But here we see who felt shame. It was Adam and it was Eve, both. Immodesty is something that both genders have to deal with. We both have to address it. Women can be immodest. Men can be immodest too. And so regardless of whether we're males or females, we need to consider carefully what we're wearing and how we're putting those clothes on when we're going out in public and engaging with people of the world. Okay? Our apparel says something about us, or it should say something about us, and we need to be mindful of that. Anything else on these passages?
I think there's an observation that needs to be made here with regard to customs in the presence of other people. Adam and Eve was the only two people walking on this earth besides all those animals. And they felt nakedness, or there was a sense of nakedness, a lack of propriety in their part in the eyes of God and out in public. And yet, we wrestle with this particular question, especially when we were younger, and then for those of us who get children and grandchildren, our children and grandchildren wrestle with this when they're younger. And it's almost as if we want to walk outside and we're invisible to other people, but the fact is we live in a world where everybody sees everything. And that sense of propriety, that's a hard word for me to say, should be within us when we're in a house with mom and dad, family or whatever, and especially when we go outside.
Yeah. Immodesty doesn't start at the door when you're exiting the house to go out and about, right? Really, when we're talking about immodesty, we're also talking about an issue of lust, which we've talked about extensively over the past several weeks, and how if we're not dressing ourselves appropriately, we can excite lust upon others, and that lust should be confined to the marriage relationship. We looked at Proverbs 7 a few weeks ago, and about adultery. And again, go ahead and flip over to that. We're not going to read all of it. But let's look at verse 6 through 10 here of chapter 7. Talking about the young man. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, and I saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a young man devoid of understanding, passing around the street near her corner. And he took the path to her house into the twilight in the evening, in the black and dark night. And there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. So we have two individuals, and we continue to read, and we see the adultery that they engage in. Bad decisions all around. We talked about that extensively a few weeks ago. Bad decision here among the young man is leaving his house and setting on the path to the woman. He knew what he was doing. He engaged on that path. He was lusting. Bad decision on the woman in this passage, the verse that we just read, verse 10, is her attire. She was enticing him to come along with her attire. And so if we're not careful, our dress can certainly provoke lust in people that we may not be intending them to have that reaction, or we may have that intention, right? And so we need to be really careful anytime we set out, whether we are home alone with just us and our kids or our grandkids or whoever, or if we're out in public for sure. Yeah, good thoughts. Anybody else? Did I see a hand over here somewhere? No. Okay. So let's go on to the passages in 1 Timothy and 1 Peter. When this conversation or topic of immodesty comes up, these are often the two passages that people go to, and so we definitely don't want to leave them out of our conversations tonight. Let's go ahead and read 1 Peter 2, 9 through 10. In like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness and with good works. So according to this passage in 1 Timothy, how should we dress? How do we adorn ourselves? Respectable. Okay. Respectable and self-control. Anybody else? Okay. So the words here in my passage are modesty, propriety, and moderation. So modesty is well arranged. It's decent. It's orderly. Propriety is with a sense of shame. Some passages actually render this shamefacedness. And then moderation with sound judgment, like Stu was talking about. There's an understanding to rein in the passions and the desires here is soundness of mind. Sobriety is another word that's used in some of these passages. And so, and again, like I said, this passage is referencing women. Is this applicable only to women? No. Men need to dress this way too. And so when we are choosing and picking out our clothes that we're going to wear, that we're going to buy, that we're going to wear, buy for our kids or our grandkids or whoever it is we're talking about, we need to be mindful that the clothes say something about us. And so Christian women and men need to dress in a way that's decent, that displays a sense of shame for being improperly covered, and has sound judgment in mind. When you're putting it on a piece of clothing, what reaction is that going to get from someone else? Is that the reaction you want to get from that person, or the reaction that you should be trying to get from that person, or not? Now, it has to be said within this context that this passage is referencing specifically the concern that women are overdressing, that they are wearing braided hair and gold or pearls or costly clothing for the desire to seek attention from someone else because they're showing off all their wealth and the things that they have. But that's not the exclusive nature of this context. You can get the same attention by underdressing too, whether you want to or not. If you are overdressing and seeking attention because of what you're wearing rather than your godly attitude or your Christian mindset, that's a problem according to this passage. Instead, we need to be dressed professing godliness. That should be what we should be focused on, adorning our inside, our hearts, our spirit, putting the focus upon that rather than layering on all these expensive, wealthy clothes for people to see. The same can be said if we're underdressing. If we are seeking attention, and so I'm going to go out and go to the gym, and I'm going to run on the treadmill with a shirt that's super short or maybe no shirt at all, I'm seeking attention. That's a problem. It's the same thing if you go to the beach and you lounge out and you're not trying to seek attention, but you're improperly dressed. What is that saying about you? Are you professing godliness in that moment, or are you professing something else that you're conforming with the rest of the world? Does that make sense?
On the underdressing side too, I mean, so your motivation obviously, plays a part. Are you seeking attention? But at the same time, immodesty is inherently sinful just by the act itself. So, I mean, and I'm more asking a question to see if I'm way out of my mind here, or whatever. But as far as, I could maybe, in my mind at least, not be seeking attention, but still be immodest, and that's still wrong. Mm-hmm. So whether or not I'm meaning to seek attention. Does that make sense?
Yes, I completely agree. It's not always just the heart. It's not always just a heart issue. Sometimes you're dressing in a way because everybody else says. You grow up going to the beach and wearing swimsuit with us, because we're guys, swimsuits, no shirts. That's what everybody wears. We're just out there blending in. We're playing in the surf with the kids, not trying to get attention, right? But we're still dressed immodestly. Is that instant? Does anybody else have a different viewpoint? Correct. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to add here, I think this text can be challenging for us, even on Sundays. For a long time there's been a view or stigma of you have to dress a certain way when you come to worship services. And, when you think about this passage here, I think individually it is challenging of why do I dress the way that I do on Sundays? And even with this idea of being immodest and drawing attention, how much and where is that line with respect to overdress, especially on Sundays. Some of that can be cultural, traditional, depending on where we grow up and the types of congregations we've been a part of. But I do think that's important. So it is a matter of the heart of, what is my motivation behind what I'm doing or why I'm wearing it? You know what I mean? Where, it's not some, if you don't wear this, then you're underdressed, or maybe the challenge here was the overdress, where there's so much attention. And I understand it certainly can go either way, but I think that's something really good for us to think about as well.
Yeah. Everything we're doing should require effort and forethought. And that's certainly getting dressed too, whether we're going out and overdressing and trying to show everyone up, or we're underdressing because that's just what we do, and it's not even a thought that we're giving. Yeah.
The world does have some standards of modesty. They're just situational, in that if you see someone in the store in worldly beachwear, they get shamed for it, because it's like, that's not appropriate. And so the challenge to us then is to not use the same situational ethics of the location that I am in dictates what Ben was saying. The location doesn't necessarily dictate exactly what I'm going to wear. Now, there might be something culturally appropriate for the occasion, to be respectful. You don't wear your flip-flops to a job interview kind of thing, unless you're applying for that kind of job. But some Christians do say, well, the location dictates, or the activity dictates what I wear, and that's not the case. That is situational ethics. That's saying that I can be less clothed because there is, sun and surf present.
Yeah. There's like this space we need to inhabit. And if going to a restaurant, for example, allows you to dress up, or to dress in shorts and a t-shirt, that's different as opposed to dressing on this end or this end. And we got to choose appropriately what's appropriate for God's standards. Yeah. Did I see another hand somewhere? Okay, let's go on to 1 Peter 3.
Hey, Zach.
Yep.
The other thing I was thinking of is earlier in that chapter, in 1 Timothy 2, in latter part of verse 2, he says that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. So it doesn't just apply, like was mentioned, with situational. The clothing is situational. You know, sometimes, yes, there was culture added in there, but you know, it still matters. Well, it does matter. I'm just going to the grocery store, or I'm just doing this, that, or the other. You know, I think I've even used this example with my kids. Let's say, you know, the president, or the president of a big company, or the governor of the state where you live asked you to come over for a nice dinner. What are you going to wear? Probably going to wear something appropriate. Probably not going to wear, you know, flip-flops and a tank top or something. But, you know, it really does speak to our heart and making sure that we're living in a godly manner in every way, not just making sure that I go to church and I don't, you know, swear and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. There are lots of times where we're given authority to act in a certain way in a very specific, narrowed sense. So, Lord's Supper, for example, we use fruit of the vine, we have used unleavened bread because that's what's specified. Clothing, we're told to wear modest clothing. And so, in the wisdom of God, it allows us to dress, to dress up to meet the president, or to dress in a different way to go to a restaurant with the family, or whatever it is. He doesn't tell us men have to wear suits and ties at every situation. Women have to wear long dresses, flowy dresses, and head coverings with every situation. There's a range of modest options that we have based upon our society and our culture and the age that we live in, technological improvements and all those sorts of things. But modesty is still modesty. And properness and decency is still properness and decency regardless of when we live. And we have to follow God's standards. We can't change it based upon our society. And we're going to talk about that a lot more in a few minutes about, well, society views it this way. Why can't I just conform? Ryan?
Correct me if I'm wrong. For our definition of modesty that we're using for this class, we're talking about underdressing to the point that it inspires lust, right? Not, can I wear flip-flops to church? Like, that's not what we're talking about.
No. There is a sense, no, absolutely not. There is a sense that properness, okay, you could get into distractions in church and all kinds of things like that. We're talking about inspiring lust in others for the purpose of this class.
Yeah, I was just going to say, though, the way that it's used with these passages, to balance it out, you still have to talk about it both ways. And yes, I think probably the challenge is more so with the lust and things like that. But you got to be careful you don't ignore the other side of it as well. Because I think that can be just as challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think our culture tends to lean towards the other direction, which is why I think we talk a lot more on the underdressing side. We see that a lot more, right? There's an issue with overdressing too, for sure. And you have to talk about both sides. But I think, to Ryan's point, this is the side that is in our face all the time. Constantly. You see billboards, you see TV shows, you see movies, you see books, you see everything in the world is pushing because sex sells. That's where it's getting thrown up in our face, it's getting thrown in our children's face. We need to address that. Also, the hard thing in preparing your heart and overdressing too.
I think a lot of the younger people, they get mixed up because of styles they got to stay in. Like an old person like me, she said, look at me, I've never paid anything for one style. I wear what I want to wear, as long as it's decent.
Yeah, it can be confusing. It can be difficult when you're just trying to fit in with your friends, and that's especially hard for young people. It is harder for other people too, right? If you are unequally yoked with people of the world, you can be pulled in any direction. Yeah. Let's go on to 1 Peter chapter 3. And this gets more to Troy's point as well. 1 Peter 3, Let's go ahead and read 1 through 6. Wives, likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. And we'll go ahead and stop there. So this passage talks a lot to the same things we just talked about, and it specifically mentions within this passage the quiet, the hidden person and the quiet spirit, the gentle and quiet spirit. And when you're dressed in a way that's overdressing or underdressing, is that exhibiting a quiet spirit? No, it's that attention-seeking spirit, whether it's an intentional or not. You're going to get attention for the way that you're dressing. And so people are not being won to you because of your chaste conduct or your quiet and gentle spirit, but rather because of the clothing that you're wearing. Peter here and Paul in the other passage uses these references where he's not saying you can't wear braided hair or fine clothing or gold earrings and those sorts of things, but rather the emphasis needs to be placed on the heart. That is where we need to put our effort in terms of being clothed properly. Clothing needs to reflect that heart. And so when we are choosing what we're wearing, that's how we need to be, that's where our emphasis should be. Questions or comments? Okay, so let's answer some common questions or justifications for immodesty that comes up. So, how would you answer these following arguments? Modern and modest fashion is so commonplace, no one notices if you're wearing something more revealing. How would you answer that if you heard a Christian say that to you?
Really is where I would go. You were a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to be separate, set apart, holy, those type of things. Are we ever going to be perfect? No. But dressing immodestly certainly isn't going to get us there.
No.
If we're supposed to be set apart and a peculiar people, we really need to be comfortable being okay with being different from other people, and just because everyone else wears it.
Right. You're reflecting your peculiarness with your heart, but also in the way that you behave and you act and you dress too. Yeah, good thoughts. Anybody else?
Takes us back to what God said that Eve, who told you that? Who told you that the modern fashion is okay and it's commonplace? Who told you that? And that's the argument that is used by so many. Everybody's doing it, or it's common, my friends, or whatever. But who told you that? Not God.
Right. There are plenty of options out there amongst modern fashions that allow you to dress in a modest way. There are some that don't. And so you got to be choosy as to what you're wearing. Matthew?
Acknowledge that there is definitely a cultural aspect to modesty, and it changes over time. So, we don't think it's immodest for women not to cover their hairs, or if they wear dresses that don't reach all the way down to their ankles anymore, even though those things used to be the standard. But another thing to point out is, not everybody that you interact with is going to be accustomed to the same things you are. So just because maybe you and your friends think it's completely normal, probably people older than you are still going to notice it. And you really don't want to be kind of on the cutting edge of that, trying to change the standard of what's modest and what's not.
Right. It's about going back to the original standard, right? And making sure that what you're choosing is based upon that. And like you said, society's view has changed. My dad's parents never wore shorts in their life. Were okay with us wearing, but they didn't feel comfortable doing it. And so they chose not to do it. And that's okay. as long as what we're looking to is the right standard. Did I see a hand in the back? Yes, Adam.
Yeah, so, you know, I would say there's a lot of evidence that's contrary to what's listed in the question, right? That the premise is that no one notices. There's a ton of evidence now, especially with like social media and specifically like Instagram and places like that. There is supporting data that says people absolutely notice, to the point where it's an epidemic among, you know, teenage girls to get the likes and the views, and they start wearing less and less and less in the pictures. So it's completely opposite of that, right? People definitely notice when you were dressing modestly.
Yeah. When I was writing this up and looking at this question, Sports Illustrated swimsuit model or issue comes out to mind. It's the top selling one, at least it used to be, I don't know if it still is, of that magazine. Why? Because people want to buy that issue. People notice. That's why the billboards and the ads and all that have immodesty in them, because it grabs your attention. If the world can admit it, that immodesty gets attention that they're seeking, why do Christians sometimes have difficulty admitting that? Anybody else? Ben?
I'm just curious, because I think this is something that would come up. So you mentioned your parents, I think, or your
Grandparents.
What did that conversation look like? Because, you know, children can have that conversation where there are still people today, women who will not wear jeans at all. So how do you make that distinction between, well, they didn't want to wear shorts, but you came to the conclusion that shorts are okay. How'd you do that?
I think it comes down to conscience. You don't want to prick your own conscience in a way that's beyond where the Scripture has given, right? So the Scripture has given guidelines about what it is, and so when you look at it and study it, there are guidelines here, and if you want to live and make guidelines for yourself that are further out for yourself, that's okay. You can't bind that on someone else, right? But if it violates your conscience to live within this space that you've given yourself as a matter of judgment, that's where we have to be okay saying, that's your judgment call, that's fine. I'm going to make this different judgment, but we're both still living within the boundaries that God has given us to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious because that's an argument that comes up, right? Where people will say, well, it may not bother my conscience, but clearly there are some lines that we cross.
Yep.
I think we all understand that, right? So I think it's something that we'll have to address with kids and friends and peers and things like that. So
yeah, especially as the world pushes further in this direction. Additional conversations will have to be taking place. Okay, question 2. Since we are all Christians and our thoughts are pure, immodest dress is not a threat to us, so I can wear what I want to wear when I'm with the brethren. You hear this sometimes when people want to go and exercise together and they're wearing things that are maybe more revealing, or go swimming or to the beach or something along those lines and wear something different.
I kind of wondered about some of this. We've been a member of one congregation for the last 50 years. I've been to some congregations where you couldn't wait the Lord's Supper if you didn't have a suit. They would not let you wait on the table. And I don't know what's right or wrong. I think you've got to wear something decent. But I've never had an opinion you had to wear a suit. A lot of people don't have suits. And so you can't go too far with some of that,
Yeah. You don't want to bind where God is not bound, for sure, on others.
we have to be considerate of brethren, and that there is something for us, being wise with what we wear, with whoever it may be, and just understanding that. I think that comes with maturity in our faith. I do think there is some caution sometimes with how I guess we have to be careful sometimes, especially like with new converts, who are new to the faith and are, growing in this aspect of modesty. And I think that's an opportunity for women in particular, older women to talk to the younger women. When somebody may be wearing something. And sometimes it could be they don't really have any understanding, they haven't really thought about it, you know, and so as they continue to grow in their faith, that can happen in relationships as well, you know, so there has to be some kind of consideration with that, I would say.
Yeah, you think about, and we just had a whole class on David. You think about David, who was a man after God's own heart, and yet he saw Bathsheba, and he fell to that lustful thought that he had. Just because he was a man after God's heart didn't mean that he didn't have temptations too. And just because we are Christians doesn't mean that we're also not going to have temptations too. Baptism doesn't change biological chemistry, right? And so if you have an attraction to this sin, whatever it is, in this case we're talking about lust, baptism doesn't change and make that magically go away. You need to work on it. It's a mind shift, and sometimes sin is easily conquered, and sometimes it's not. And so we need to definitely be mindful of what other Christians are thinking. Ben?
Yeah, and the other side of that too is, you know, we have to control ourselves, just like you were saying that, right? Where, you know, I've made a covenant with my eyes, that's what Job said, you know, so we have to take personal responsibility, wherever we may be.
Right. Okay. This one I did not put in the book, but I meant to when I was writing it. I can wear what I want. It's not my fault if others can't control their thoughts. You see this a lot in the world primarily. I can wear whatever I want. If they have an issue with what I'm wearing, that's their problem, not mine. How would you address this if you heard a Christian say this?
Doesn't show much love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
About the souls of others.
Yeah. Yep. If you look at...
Does this also mean that I can say what I want, do what I want, not just dress the way I want?
Yeah.
I mean, two people can be wrong at the exact same time, too. I mean, you could be wrong for putting that stumbling block in front of your brother or your sister, and they could also be wrong because, I mean, they don't get a free pass just because you threw that out there. They're responsible for their own eyes as well. So both can be condemned for their actions.
Yes, for sure.
The first part of the sentence in the question before said, Christians' thoughts are pure.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean we're sinless? I don't think
Absolutely not. Matthew 18. Jesus is talking about the little ones and when the children were coming. And in verse 6, he says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. The person who's sinning is wrong, and if you are causing that person to sin, that is wrong too.
I think Romans 14 spells it out, not to be a stumbling block, not to be a hindrance, not to cause your brother to sin. But I think that very first statement is absolutely antithetical to the attitude that a Christian should have as a servant to each other, to submit to each other. And that attitude says, I'm at the top of the heap, I'm not serving you. Doesn't matter what you think. And that's just antithetical to how a Christian should think.
Yeah, everything we do should be for the edification of someone else. Kevin.
The works of the flesh is lasciviousness, which we've studied quite a bit this quarter. And one of the definitions, that's just a blatant disregard, right, of what is pure, right? So whether it's your own soul or the soul of another, right, you're causing one to you're acting in a way that will promote lascivious thoughts or activity. It's simple, it's wrong.
It is. Yeah. Always seek the betterment of others. Submit one to another. For sure. Okay. That is pretty much all the time that we have. Next week we will be on lesson 8, I think it is, which is abortion and euthanasia. So thank you all so much for your comments and discussion.